Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the world's very first major rulebook for AI. But here's the twist. We're not going to focus on the people who build it. Nope, we're talking about the rules for everyone else. The companies, the police, the banks, basically anyone putting this powerful tech to use in the real world. See, this new EU AI Act, it's not just for the big tech companies that are creating these systems. It actually puts some pretty heavy responsibilities on anyone who deploys what the law calls high-risk AI. So let's get into what that really means.
The thing is, high-risk AI isn't some sci-fi future. It's here, right now, making huge decisions that affect our lives, our careers, our finances, you name it. And that brings up a really big, and honestly, a very personal question.
Think about this for a second. To make this really hit home, just picture an AI being involved in one of these moments. So, say your job application gets screened by an AI. A system scans your resume, looks at your experience, and makes the call on whether you even get to talk to a real person.
Or maybe your loan approval is decided by an algorithm. An AI goes through your entire financial life to decide if you can get that mortgage for a new home.
And what about this? A police investigation uses facial recognition AI. The software is trying to pick a suspect out of a crowd, and a mistake there could have, well, just devastating consequences. So it all comes back to this one crucial point. Who is on the hook when these incredibly powerful tools are actually used? The EU's answer to that big question, well, it's pretty much spelled out in one key section. Article 26. You can think of it as the official instruction manual for anyone who's going to put high-risk AI out into the real world. Okay, so the law uses a really specific word here, deployer. Notice it doesn't say user. And that choice of words is super deliberate. It actually reveals a huge shift in how regulators are thinking about who's responsible.
You can actually see this was a very conscious change. The original proposal back in 2021 used the word user, which kind of implies you're just passively operating a tool. But the final act, the one passed in 2024, switched to deployer. And that's not just playing with words. It's a massive signal. It implies an active role, a responsibility for how the system is implemented and watched over. It's about moving from just using a product to deploying a system into our society.
So, Article 26 basically builds this whole idea of responsibility on three core pillars that every single deployer has to follow. Let's break them down, starting with maybe the most important one.
Okay, Pillar 1, human control and oversight. The fundamental idea here is super simple. A human has to be in charge, always. The AI does not get to run the show all by itself.
First, you've got to assign competent staff. Make sure the people watching the AI are actually trained and have the power to step in. Second, you have to actively monitor it, constantly keeping an eye on how it's operating. And third, you have to retain the power to stop it. You need the ability to jump in, suspend the system, or just flat out override its decision if it starts acting weird or poses a risk. This means you absolutely cannot set it and forget it. It's a legal duty now. You have to have qualified people watching, and this is key, they need the authority to pull the plug at any moment.
Next up, Pillar 2, data quality and fairness. This one tackles that age-old problem in tech. Garbage in, garbage out, right? And AI is only ever as good or as fair as the data you feed it.
So, what does that mean in practice? Well, first, you have to control your input data. You need to make sure the data you're feeding the system is actually relevant and representative for what you want it to do. Then you have to actively work to mitigate bias, to stop the system from just repeating or even amplifying biases that are already in the data. And finally, you have to conduct a Data Protection Impact Assessment, or a DPIA, to figure out and reduce any risks to people's privacy. Basically, the law is putting the duty on the deployer to check their own data and make sure it's not going to lead to some kind of discriminatory mess, which, let's be honest, is a huge challenge when so much of our historical data is packed with historical bias.
All right, the third and final pillar is transparency and accountability. This one is all about proof. It's about being able to show that you're using the AI responsibly by creating a really clear record.
So how do you do that? First, you have to keep detailed logs, basically automatically generated records of what the AI is doing, and you have to keep them for at least 6 months. Second, if something serious happens because of the system, you have to report it immediately to the provider and to the authorities. And finally, you have to cooperate with those authorities if they ever come knocking to investigate. What this does is it creates a mandatory paper trail, so if something does go wrong, if a bad decision gets made, it can actually be investigated, it can be understood, and hopefully it can be stopped from ever happening again.
Okay, so we've got all these rules. What does this actually look like in reality? Let's take those 3 pillars and apply them to that AI hiring system we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so let's walk through this. For human control, the company would make sure its HR specialists are trained to understand what the AI is spitting out, and, crucially, that they have the authority to override the AI's rankings. For data quality and fairness, the company makes sure the resumes it feeds the system don't have things like photos to help reduce bias, and they do that privacy impact assessment on all the applicant data. And for transparency and accountability, they keep logs of the whole screening process, and they actually tell employee representatives that they're using AI in hiring. You see how this works? It takes these abstract legal rules and turns them into a really concrete checklist for a business.
At the end of the day, these rules for deployers, they're about way more than just checking boxes or trying to avoid a fine.
The whole point of these obligations is to try and build a future where we can actually trust the AI systems that are shaping our lives. By making sure a human is always in the loop, by demanding fair and high-quality data, and by creating clear accountability, the goal of the EU AI Act is to make this technology safer and, more equitable for every single one of us.
So the EU has written its rulebook. But is this the right balance? Is it the perfect mix for protecting citizens while still letting innovation flourish? This framework is already setting a massive precedent around the globe, making every other country and company sit up and pay attention. And it leaves all of us with that really critical question to think about as AI just gets more and more powerful. Thanks for joining this explainer.